Good evening. Thank you very much for coming here tonight to hear about good plans and good practices to keep our city centres alive. And I'm very excited to be chairing this panel with these incredible 5 speakers. So we start with Angela Higgins, newly founder of our partners. Gina Corley, architect at 360 Architecture. Peter Kerr, Director of Cameron Care and Chair of ISIO Scotland. Bruce Patrick, Director of Laugh Real Estate. Welcome. So we had an event here in Salotto last January where we had a beautiful lunch to start with. But we had a very nice group of people. Angela and Bruce were here and Jerry from 360 Architecture. And we wanted to discuss about what we could possibly do for Glasgow, because I think we're all passionate about the city we live in. Even me, I am an adopted Clearsbeach. After 12 years, I absolutely love this city and I can see all the potential that it's got. And kind of it's a bit sad that it's always considered less than other places in the UK and Scotland. So what can we do to fulfill this potential? So we started this conversation that ended up around food. So we discuss about that a little bit later on. But to start with, Gina, you are our city centre expert, town centre expert. Through 360 Architecture, you're working around Scotland in quite a lot of new Regeneration, you work in Paisley, East Pride, and you're working in Canada, in Glasgow. So what do you think are the core elements and why is a city centre/town centre so important for the cities?
Yeah, and it's on the town centre itself. We know we need to develop in a sustainable way. That means in the place where it's easy to access and where there are already sites and infrastructure there. I mean, there are a lot of challenges at the moment with variability in terms of town and city centre regeneration, but there is also a lot of opportunity. And that is often for us centering around a large single ownership retail asset. So where we can turn a villain into a hero and make that part of the story for a town like East Kilbride that you mentioned. There are so many places where there's a large half-empty shopping centre, half-empty retail streets and retail parks as part of that equation as well. But where you have that large single ownership asset and the ability to use the vacancy, the potential in asset to do something transformational. And that takes public sector stewardship, it takes involvement, it takes the idea of taking public sector investment and catalysing that and leveraging it with the public sector's investment as well. And that is really the opportunity that we have these days to bring back what we need in town centres. And retail is obviously important, but places to live, services and amenities that support life is what we need to bring back into our city centres. So that I could talk a little bit more about East Kilbride never currently with the so on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bruce, you are my mixed use expert, right?
Yeah.
So Gina just touched slightly into it. What are doing this thing right? I'm thinking about a bit of everything. And so why is mixed use so instrumental?
So I think the reason why mixed use is so important and it's something that I've tried to specialise in since 2017. And setting up math post cells was an attempt by me to sort of lead people further into mixed use and really try to fundamentally understand why I thought it was so important to do some of the stuff that we've done with and I've put the team over the years. And so it's a reaction really to this sort of monoculture that we established around towns and centres, that it was all retail focused. Coming back to some of the themes which I've around feminist cities and resilient town centres, etc. The way that we've designed, occupied, laid out, established towns and city centres across Scotland, and it seems to be a real sort of issue you've got in central Scotland in particular, perhaps because we're quite new towns we have, and the fact that Glasgow itself has been such a retail city, is that sort of monoculture or dual culture of office and retail being underused has been completely found out by structural change in retail, COVID, all that change how to work. And so I became kind of obsessed with this idea that there must be a better sort of blend of uses that were able to connect places that looked beyond traditional uses. So it included operational real estate, higher education, which is really important in Scotland. And I was actually really inspired by working at the University of Glasgow and seeing the design of some of their spaces. So they really got how to sort of blend education, living, leisure spaces on their campus. And spaces like the ground floor of the Gymnast building, for example, are probably my favourite space in all of Scotland. Whenever I get an opportunity, I go through there. It's literally just one floor of the building. It's like the very essence of mixed-use space. So I just think that space is a place for people to meet that can be interchangeable between day and night. It can be stacked or layered on top of each other to give density and help with this sort of issue that Glasgow has, which is it's got a phenomenal strength, I think, of great places that are fragmented, not connected up. And I just became really interested as to how can mixed use help connect those dots between the West End, the city centre, and the East End.
So, Lisa, this brings us to one of the concepts you're working on that they try category innovation district, the 20-minute neighborhood or 50-minute, we talk to sometimes it's 15, sometimes 20. So what can you talk us through the concept and why would that be, why is it that beneficial for a town of the city centre, which is basically, it ties in with what Bruce just went through.
So do you want to correct
The 20-minute neighborhood.
Yes, so I've been looking to work on a lot of large master planning design of, say, 20-minute neighborhoods. It's the latest approach. The phrase has been coined. It's attractive conflict. It's making fear and a conspiracy theory around it. We kind of think it's just a good way of designing nice neighborhoods that it's enjoyable to get around in, that has local services that you can access easily, that feels connected. You can have a nice experience of living there because you meet other people in your day-to-day experience. And I kind of, before I came here, I Googled nice neighborhoods to live in. I went down a Reddit thread and everybody sort of says things like, oh, it's got nice cafes nearby and it's easy to get to the city centre and, there's schools and nurseries and, parks nearby. And so everybody sort of has an understanding of what a nice neighborhood feels like. And that's essentially what 20-minute neighborhood is to us. And so they do exist. They're not impossible to create. But we have moved away from that approach to planning cities, and it became about zonal planning. And we all work here and we all live here, and we don't actually travel by cost to get between those two places. And this is sort of a bit of a reaction to that. And it has its challenges, as I said, and it's in trend in NPF4 policy. But I think that policy does need to trickle down into kind of local councils and how they choose to invest in their infrastructure. A lot of developers aren't necessarily geared to deliver mixed use. You have kind of scale house builders who like rented houses aren't so sure what to do in terms of, shop units and community spaces and how does that even work for them. The kind of short-term funding models don't necessarily lend themselves to that type of thinking. So you need that kind of strategic thinking. And then also, it's tricky to be quite top down about this sort of stuff, but actually we do need to think about the actual experience on ground, people living in these places and what is it they actually need, what would improve their lives, and do you need a bus route, do you need, what are the things that they actually need, and rather than sort of kind of thinking as a big plan going here, it's about option use and likes and all those kind of things. So there's definitely areas that can improve on.
research what's happening in Skid now. We've got 50 million to create new homes, public spaces in a city centre.
Yeah, I mean, so Easter Road's really interesting one, and it's one we've been working with the council since 2023 on. And it really has been an exemplar in terms of what you're talking about in a deep and meaningful engagement process with the community. You know, going way above and beyond a statutory 2 afternoons in a shopping unit to kind of try and see maybe 10, if you're lucky, 100 people. We need councils and clients to invest proper resources and proper time into these processes, and that's what we've been doing over the years. I guess with ideas, you know, setting up an exhibition for 3 weeks in the shopping centre. Right now, we've set up a permanent pop-up exhibition within the library in the town centre to constantly be able to update it based on what's happening, but also just trying to make it as easy and engaging for the public to kind of bump into those exhibitions, you know, even down to things like having a little colouring in book for kids to get their imagination to what the proposals might be, and so that parents can get a chance to actually look and read what's going on at the end of things. So yeah, getting that deeper meaningful engagement, which is obviously one of the key tenets of the Feminist City approach to planning and development, which I think top one as well. But yeah, so that's been an amazing process so far, and we've been able to get data sets from people in the thousands, you know, rather than tens or hundreds, and be able to actually break that data down, identify who's missing from the engagement process, who we're not reached, like young people are kind of underrepresented. How do we go out and actually get there in the schools and talk about things and things like that, and being able to see what different people need, as you were saying. But yeah, through that, in terms of the project, the master plan, just the other day received granted, the PBIP was granted by committee. So now we're moving into the individual work streams within that PBIP, which is for, if anybody knows East Kilbride, the west leg of the mall, centre west, East Kilbride being a new town that the retail centres have grown arms and legs over the recent decades. But yeah, really interesting as well to go back into that history of the new town and what we can actually learn from the successes and failings of the development organisations. Like that ambition and that public-private partnership was amazing. It was very top down, as you were saying, kind of no engagement and paternal in that kind of way. So we can learn a bit from that. It really is about what I was talking about earlier, that we have too much retail spaces that's boomed in the 90s and 2000s, and we need to kind of right-size the retail, and that's opening up opportunities for a new civic town hall, a new gathering public space, and new homes, social and private, which will mean East Kilbride now has town centre rather than a sort of shopping centre only. It's a new era in a relatively young town, if you like, but learning from the past and building on that.
So when we talk about workplace, how can the offices contribute to the life of the city centre from different perspectives? I mean, we understand that people come to the office, then they go out for lunch and buy something from the cafes, or maybe they need some, or the wee junkies in their house.
Yeah, I think if you take it, say, before we spoke about the office is Glasgow, as I say, as a mix. That needs to be fixed for people to want to inhabit the city. And I think that's key. Offices play a big part of that because they have dense spaces for lots of people to inhabit. And I think that's the important part of what offices have to play in the city centre. It's different on the peripheral areas like Gateway, I think, they're more local, right? But in the city centre, that's a 20-minute neighbourhood that could be, because you can walk from one side to the other very easy. And you've got such great access to potentially great restaurants, potentially great cafe spaces. And I say potentially because I think it could be better, it could be more. But the problem is that we've got enough habitation for the city centre. I think a part of that is because more than half of our workforce isn't actually mandated to actually come out at least a few days a week, right? I think that's an issue. Maybe nobody wants to say that, but that's the reality of the situation. Is that, and unless we have people inhabiting the city centre again,
from the offices. That's of daytime activity. That keeps those businesses going. And then it can go back to the nighttime activity because those businesses exist at night as well as during the day. And that opens up opportunities for the residents to have a better experience to city centre. The other thing for me, we've talked about the Feminist City, security at the city centre. Right? A lot of it used to be more passive surveillance, more people, but there's too many dark alleyways, there's too many spaces that are not inhabited by lots of people. There's areas of the city centre that are not. And if you take if you go down the wrong street, it's not a street you really want to be lost in. So I think, so I'm obviously taking the negative side of from the aspirational elements that you guys are talking about, but these are the reality of our city centre. I'm sure we all can share that kind of feeling. But going back to the office plays a huge part in providing that density, which allows those businesses to thrive. Allows the taxi drivers, we're talking about, Angela's talking about the taxi drivers, so the Uber drivers are driving out, all the other kind of taxi services, now they're surcharging all the time, right? But that's because, again, that's that question of enough, I feel like, for everyone. Because if you've got the demands, that really helps, with respect to keeping those kind of prices down and making sure there's more people available and more for them, sharing competition, but healthy competition. It keeps those kind of economic stable. Whereas if you don't have that economic stability, you end up with surcharges all the time.
Angela, founder of Avalon Hire. So it's a BTR consultant. We spoke about this before. I was very skeptical about the BTR concept until I went to see a development just around the corner. And all of a sudden I got it. I said, especially, I remember when I moved to London, that I didn't know anybody in the city. If I had access to a build-to-rent apartment, a build-to-rent development, it would have been so much easier for me to integrate into the city from somebody that came from Milan, or not even the UK, completely different town. So I totally see it now how build-to-rent play a massive role, especially when it's so hard to have people living in the city centre because the private rentals are rubbish. Then it's impossible to buy a flat. So what do you see? Why did you choose to focus the next section of your career in this pathway?
Okay, the background of inclusive is keen on cooking something we've talked about for many years in last years. Concepts I spent years doing asset management on the commercial side and being very keen on ramping in the creative arts and making sure that we help people work all day, but people can enjoy themselves and relax when they're in at the days, can have lots of service, lots of amenity, with a nursery and office and eating and the arts and everything together. And from that grew an interest in a little bit of living. Because at the time that I was bringing Hermes into Glasgow, who I thought were really the best urban media guys in the UK and one of the best in Europe, I started looking at what they were doing in London and what they were doing in Manchester, and I started looking at what other people were doing in those cities and thinking, we've got to bother here. And I really realised they were stumbling. So in order to kind of grow my own experience and expertise in the wider area, I just started working with Amanda, who's an ex-ops director of Modern Living, just so that we could see, well, we wanted to do the good stuff, genuinely do the good stuff that we were interested in, and the commercial things, so your work-life balance would be good, but then you could do your work-life living balance. And that's why we thought, well, BTR, don't look at it in a kind of cold skeletal way. Don't see it as just a developer block where you're ramming in lots of flats. Let's try and encourage a much healthier, more holistic view of how to live. So Glasgow, for example, in terms of people living in the city centre area, is about a third of the main cities, and in some of the internal cities, it feels like 75% of people living in rented accommodation within their city centre boundaries. And we would be down in the 30s. So I think there's something wrong with that, because for years you come out to Glasgow and then I'd be busy in the offices, they'd be dead at 6 o'clock. And I think the Merchant City attempted it for a while, and then it kind of plateaued. And then there's a few pockets, there's a Drumstein, there's Moder up at Balkan Street, but what we should be trying to look at is how to integrate all those uses, because we do have people living, working, eating, and really share a big passion on food, they got big glue on how they make your society work well. Then let's see if we can emulate some of these fantastic bigger quarters that we see in the King's Cross. King's Crosses, many of you know, you would do the right take 20 years ago, you wouldn't need motive for that. Now it's an area that you would be living in, because it's got an art school, it's got primary schools, it's got lots of eating, it's got fantastic retail, but it's so quirky. And what I've been realising is that there are real challenges on making that living piece work in a way that good quality enough from people who want to live it, because I'm really, really am against ramming in lots of flats, as many as you can in a building in one wee room with gym equipment in it. It's not real. It's going to bore you to tears after 6 months and you walk. It's got to have things for longevity. So for longevity, we need long-term capital, we need patient capital, and we need public-private partnership. So I just think I'm really interested in the living piece of where that wraps into that larger mixed-use scheme, and that's why we're focusing on this, is how do we improve by giving, hand-holding people, giving them better advice on how to design the new inn, so that it has got a lifestyle for the occupier. Because if you don't think of the person living there, it's never going to be right. So it kind of evolved from that, and Amanda and I met through an involvement in the art school, through a fantastic people from GSC that's here, and that was a common interest in the arts. It was how do we actually look at designing skills that are a bit life in them, and people will enjoy living it. So I, for one, I would love to see big cohesive schemes in my own city. And I was attending it 25 on the site I was working on, but we're hitting barriers all the time with local authority. So authority, you shouldn't have been tripping us up. You should have been welcoming us all with open arms, not viewing you as just wanting to make money. Making money is something that's going to help people invest, but you've got to see that people do profession as well. So I'm enthusiastic about trying to make a difference in the city, but what I've recognised is it's a challenge unless there's a big kind of multi-ownership. So I'd like to see more of that. I'd like to see more of the NOLAs or the big paradise or the big King's Cross approach to life in the city. And ultimately, it's about a bit of gap funding. It's probably about a bit of public really. I mean, and we were getting pelters about looking at Manchester at the last discussion. And I know Manchester gets criticised for saying, well, you're just allowed too many people to run in and invest money. But Manchester and Glasgow used to be eye to eye, and we're not way down there now. It's vibrant, it's buzzing, it's got all the great leisure. People are living and enjoying themselves in the city. It's not happening here. We are way below where we should be on headcount for BTR compared to UK cities, and we're way below Europe. So let's not just look at Britain, because we were all a bit brainwashed by Thatcher. Buy. Let's not what everybody was thinking in the continent. I was thinking, now, like, I think with the younger generation coming through, they recognise they want to be footless, they don't like renting. So if you look at the rent-driven cities in the continent, they're actually very, very vibrant in the city centre. You know, the Italian, the French cities, the Dutch cities, they're eating, living, enjoying themselves, working all in the Midland district, rather than feeling that they're doing one, they pushing out to the edge of the centre. The interesting BTR came from that, and it's more a living sector. It's just this is the area where you think we can drag engagement in. And Glasgow get up to, where it should be. It's the third largest city in Britain. So let's get more people living in our city, and it's just the need to do it.
Can I ask a question also?
Yes.
So, do you see the opportunity at the moment because of the Build Safety Act down south for them to create sort of barriers?
Yeah.
Right? The very cap down there.
Yeah.
So sort of barriers.
Yeah.
Certainly developers I'm involved with down there are looking up here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Obviously there was money not coming in here because of that being
the
deterrent, but I think that the stated housing emergency in Scotland was helpful to us.
Mhm.
And then the panel that looked at what should we do, so we looked out BTR, and let's help bring some investment in. But if you actually look at the numbers for Glasgow, such as Scotland as a whole, Glasgow, for example, is probably a third BTR proportionate compared to the likes of maybe Manchester. I mean, London's obviously the centre of most units in the UK, and it's, you know, leagues ahead of everybody else today. Let's capitalise on that, because there is money that's coming out of the office market because of everything we described, where post-COVID and work from home, there's a wee bit of uncertainty as, you know, other than real collocations, where's that race people travel to? Let's put it in the living sector. But then we're scratching the heads a wee bit, saying, well, how? And if you just back, I guess the developers were in, if you just back the bare development approach to it, it's going to be barren. It's going to be pile it up and pile out and get your profit and leave. And that's not really the best longer term view for the occupant. And it's not the best longer term view for the city as a whole. But we do need, as I was saying to Rafa, we need more chaos. We need less regulation. We need more embrace. We need more statements for the planners to say, this is what we want, not this is everything we don't want. So it's how do we oil the wheels? Got a great opportunity just now to oil the wheels with money.
Yeah.
And there's this, you know, these involvements are really excited things to try and help investors come in. And Amanda and I and Robin, with the business partner in London, we just thought, well, we've all got collective experience in either mixed use or VTR, but let's bring it here. Let's see what we can do to get very good schemes with good money behind them where people will enjoy living. And
So knows how to do that. How to bring the good developers in, the people that got vision and they care about the building and leaving a legacy behind.
Develop our investors turn to Scotland because of the streets down south. I think the first signs you're going to see is you're going to see the best BTR sites start getting through it. So they're not going to get started funded yet, but they're going to start getting sold. So if you go with platforms or with their own ability to get some of the better schemes out of the ground, I think you're going to be West End and Finnison first. Really surprised if something doesn't go this year. So, and we'll see. The other piece is there has to be innovation in a holistic sense from the very start to the end. And that innovation system is around building draws, families, music lit services, etc. It's pretty clear that the successful schemes south of the border in the last 5 years have involved a high degree of integration between grant funding. So Manchester, between 2014 and 2019, got £300 million of grant funding from the government pumped into their housing economy by way of loans, funds, and equity into construction companies, into gap funding, etc., etc. And so Manchester had this massive shots beyond. The Glasgow's never had one, Scotland's never had. We're talking about the Scottish Roads Agency that might come, but quite frankly, 3 years away, we would use this plane to borrow. The key as we see it is that the schemes that have been built down south now have some sort of degree of integration between the developer and contractor. So an organisation has got the ability to look at the total profit coming out of the scheme, not just the developer hat on, but a contractor hat on as well. And our sort of hunch, our bet at the moment, is the next turn of that is the developer has their own fund manager structure with people embedded there as well. And that sort of fund management structure is out effectively creating a fund-like structure around a platform, and then it's basically going out seeking funding for that platform, particularly for global funding pension schemes, talking to Angela about where the investors are coming from. The local pension schemes are pulling together, directed by the government. They've got the lowest cost of capital, the lowest sort of target returns, and they are overweight commercial and underweight residential. And so we're actively working with developer clients as to how we create an in-house fund management structure that solves part of the systemic issue, which is who's got the cash to build and hold some of this stuff. I think after that's the one.
Gina, the feminist cities, would they be able to help and partially solve the problem that Peter brought up, as in we don't feel feminist centre.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you were talking about that, I was recalling a situation where we were working on the Golden Z in strategy for the city centre, you know, hearing stories from women and trying to get walking groups and things like that around the sites. But yeah, on a night out in Glasgow, you're kind of, women were saying that they're having to make the choice between walking down a brightly lit street like Sauchiehall Street and they face potential harassment issues on the street, or walk down an dingy dark lane in the back to, you know, whatever else might be the issues there. So it's a very real, very structural issue that we need to address. It's not something to be taken lightly at all. But yeah, like the challenges that we have is that the planning and development have historically favoured the needs of people in positions of authority, which tended to be men, white people, wealthy people, cis people, all of that. And so now we've got the challenge of how do we use a feminist lens to represent the marginalised folk that this inequity kind of affects. So a young Black mother in the city, a disabled person, someone who's been through the care system, or trans people, they all face different barriers that the other. And the feminist approach is not a new thing. You know, there's been research and scholarship on this since the 60s, really, when it kicked off. And here we are sitting 60 years later, where we actually need to start embedding this into policy and how planning is run on a policy basis. So that's what Glasgow have signed up to do. They're the first city in the UK to do this of a feminist city, which is great. It's partly followed by Edinburgh. So yeah, the motion is kind of straightforward and passed unanimously in 2022. What does that mean? So it means Glasgow have set up a kind of advisory board within the council. They've allocated annual budget to the agenda, starting doing kind of pilot projects, you know, small kind of like seed projects, like looking at lighting, looking at public facilities, and looking at public art. But they're building on that now, and they've appointed a full-time officer who's going to lead this agenda, which is great. And they're commissioning strategies and toolkits in collaboration with the public sector to actually translate that that thinking into, you know, design guidance and policy. And what does that mean? You know, people always think about safety as the main issue, but while it's highly important, it's not all about that. And we don't want to fall into the trap of like seeing women as the vulnerable victim all the time. It's about how you actually can you bring the positive aspects of design and development to make it as good as possible. So you mentioned road, all that activity and bring more people into places, but then it's also like mobility, looking at patterns of transit, and not just looking at the traditional commute in and out of the city centre, but how you actually work within the neighbourhood, things like that. Housing policy, green spaces, like young girls disappear from play spaces and green spaces faster than young boys. So why is there not places for them specifically to hang out? All sorts of different things, but I suppose it all comes back down to that process and that engagement, and actually making that meaningful engagement process to find out what the needs of local people are within a city. So yeah, I'm feeling very, very proud that Glasgow is kind of leading the way on the UK on this. You know, it is a global phenomenon that places like Vienna, Barcelona, Scandinavian countries are leading on. But yeah, you're right up here, and we've got actions that we should be proud of, and we should be talking about.
So Lisa, you are working on the I always get this word wrong. Gateway Innovation District, which is huge, totally massive, mixed use regeneration project. How have you put all the elements together in this huge mixing bowl?
Yeah, it's a big project. It's a fantastic project. And I suppose I'd speak to both project and the client in this. So the reason that Client Gateway exists as a client, and they're a Regeneration company, and it's actually a fantastic model for long-term strategic place-based renewal of an area. And so their area of responsibility is in the east of Glasgow. It's a huge area. It encompasses existing communities, Dunrana, Glen, Ridgedale. And their reason for being is to sort of drive improvement and investment for those communities. And like many areas in Glasgow, it's former industrial, fragmented, communities that made that kind of forgotten as this industry left large swathes of area that's kind of heavily polluted. And so the mechanism of like Gateway is essentially that they get public funding, but they use that to leverage private investment in this area. And they, in so doing, bring opportunities and job opportunities to the area. They build communities in the area. And like, they kind of have learned from kind of previous experience decades ago. So from the outset, they kind of see themselves as part of the community. And again, it's not about top down, it's about ground up and identifying what communities need, and looking at kind of creating business space, but also building community capacity, skills development, working with local schools, working with local groups, connecting local people with the jobs that they create. And so they have this kind of long-term strategic vision for a place. And then last year they reached their master plan, and they've done a lot of work already. They've delivered a lot in that area. And this is kind of a renewed push in terms of creating, it's about 1 million square foot of potential business space. Recognizing the office market being the way it is, it's a kind of pivot towards a more flexible ecosystem of high value manufacturing space, research space, support for science, tech, support for kind of startup businesses coming straight out of universities and needing cheap space to just, sit at a desk and then scale up their business in a same place. And they kind of create business support as well as the space for these businesses to start and to grow. And so the master plan is very much about that, but it's also, there's going to be residential communities as part of this. And they kind of brought us in to sort of take a real placemaking approach to things. And so it's about how do you create all these rich blends of uses in one place, and how do you think about public space, how these buildings address the street, create it's in too close to somebody. How you allow the logistics for these kind of uses to happen, but also create these really great public spaces, connections for the existing community, connections back to the city, and going back to this kind of positive live, work, and enjoy sort of holistic approach to creating a place. So yeah, we're quite excited about what's heading forward. The real kind of game here will be that of generation in east of Glasgow. So yeah, watch this space.
What do you do? Peter, and I took my career is appearing on the same article that we on the Herald last week, talking about industry. One of the questions that we were asked that I thought was really interesting is, which obviously you are much more prepared to answer that than me, because I was just faff about it. But do we need more offices? No, the journalist Cole Wright asked at the Union Street site, which unfortunately might get access from the city, would we need more offices?
I don't think that's the best place for office. Just being honest. I think it needs to be a mixed use development. It needs to have something that opens up, see the role we used to do, the conversation. You don't want that blocking off your view through the Gallagher Street. You want that to be opened up a little bit, public realm there. Maybe hotel, maybe some more retail, not bake shops. But I think a mixed use development there would be really good. I think in terms of the bigger question, office space. So there is demand for office. Like, everything comes down to the economic question, which Bruce can probably answer more eloquent than me, but the rent prices need to catch up with the inflation they're offered. And I think that as you get returns, and obviously that isn't being maybe easier at the moment. So the cost of living is getting worse. So in terms of we need office space, but we're not going to developers to build the office space at the moment at the right economic level, and that's the real challenge. And one of the big issues we've got is the ageing stock, because I think one of the things is we had a co-star, we never know if you ever this, but we had a co-star kind of presentation at the end of the year from a BCO perspective, and that was really interesting for kids. the way that they do fertility statistics is just, I'll be honest, feeling like nonsense. Like, it talks about vacancy. It doesn't talk about vacancy in respect of occupiable space. So it talks about buildings that are their office that are occupied, but it doesn't talk about could you occupy that space in office? Because I'll be honest with you, there's a huge amount of spaces that are classified as office space that you could not occupy without development. And that is the big issue. Nobody's going to remember those spaces. Right? There's so much so many poor buildings that constructed was these, which were designed and then are planning policy and then makes us put forward an argument. And I'm all for making arguments, but planning policy makes an argument to say, well, why do you need to lock it down? And you're almost going, seriously, when they just tell me why we need to lock this building down, it's an absolute mess of a building. So we've got lots of existing stock, which is really poor quality in a city. We have a demand. We don't have the right economic climate to refurbishment, refurbished buildings, and we don't have the right demand to build a big, nice, shiny new building either. And I know a big advocate at the moment of I would try if we can make it work first. That's what we'll do. Talk about like Clyde, one of the projects we worked on before we set up our business was these flats, the gas fairs actually. And that's it. Really cool. It's a cool building. Like, and you'd be great if we had some of that type of stuff inside the school. See that other than if you put that in its centre, you go, that'd be so no bother, no problem. I mean, I've had a bit more money as well to spend on it because there's other things on that build. So I think, office market's tough. Which is why I love the
You're saying you think you would like Scottish Government to make statements to dates from the front and go back to the office, because I think people go, oh, we can't force people to come back and work from home, but can we leave behind what the old view is of what a workplace should be?
Exactly.
That's the key. Workplace shouldn't be everybody sitting in rows, and rabbit hutches turn around and work out. It should be somewhere where you can enjoy being. And everybody's kind of lost sight after COVID, and we were the last city we tried to emerge back out of it and badly.
Yes.
In many ways, it's never recovered. Look at hospitality, limping along. It's not about just going to your work and going home. If we all look around, like, where do you meet your friends? Where did you meet your friends? Whether you went to uni or you didn't do it, so where did you meet your friends? Where did you meet your boyfriend, your husband, the girlfriend, the fiancé? You met them at work. And if people aren't going to work, we're really in a worrying state for society. We're all isolated. We're all stuck back at you're living in your office. Do you really want to be doing that? But we were doing the redevelopment of the Lucent 50 Bottle Street with Orion. We were saying to Orion, look, you need to spend a lot of money making us really feel good, because people don't want to be in it otherwise, because they used to be able to make a cup of tea and relax. And so they did spend a lot of money in a green room area that was not a business lounge. It was purely everybody to relax in. And we did appreciate them to make a lot of breakout space and fantastic works of art. People want to be in it. And it's the same kind of mantra as like what can be bring into the living sector. It's like, well, look, start with how good it would be to be in it and how you might feel and take it from there, because that's how you get people to want to stay. Retention is kind. Won't want to pay a higher rent to live there or a higher rent to work in it. And the same kind of ethos should apply across the sectors, shouldn't it? And it is sustainable. Yes, we'd see 15 years of carbon, between carbon and that building, by being like back into a building that's in it for 5 years. So yeah, you can do all that. When it's challenging sometimes in the living sector because of the depth of space and the layouts and and so forth. But I'm a true believer that in making a workplace a really lovely place to go into, people will want to be in it. I mean, when we were running Stead Park, people would say, well, actually come in the days you've got events on. So they wanted to come out to work as long as there's an attraction. We're not to sit in some grey room, the grey hallway, with nothing there, no life. I mean, human nature being as it is, you're going to want to be comfortable down. But when you dig beneath the reality and you talk to the occupiers, they would tell you that productivity flatlined whenever and working from home. It doesn't matter what people were saying, it's still working well. For new ideas, it was not, and it doesn't. Because you need to collaborate. So I think that looking at the the frustrations that you feel in the office sector, which I share, ripples across in the living as well, because I do think when people live and work in the same districts, that actually leads into their issues under the feminist city, because the more people there are there, the safer it is. So they all start to bleed into each other. Everybody benefits. It's just attracting the money in. What could I think? Well, we could get into that, but we need a different political spectrum. We need to not have neoliberal politics. 20 years that need a bit napping and investment in our infrastructure. There's a big problem for us, and that's part of the Eastern trouble. In Scotland, it's like how you get money. How do we make the money if people want to save 2 pence of tax to buy a BMW with the driver? It's madness. You know, I remember doing work in Belgium with a Sky Gaetan, and he was saying it's 50% tax. And the guys that I were with were going, oh, you said there's no private schools and there's no private hospitals because everything is good enough for everybody. So I mean, I personally like to see a change in the political spectrum that would create more investment, would force people to not hide all their money offshore, and the start-ups are all would be made to pay at point of sale because they need the money circulating back in our cities so that people can live and work there.
So that draws me back to Lucy and then when did their beautiful presentation today about the workplace and what you just said, that then we need to build workplaces that take into consideration the user experience, like you do in hospitality, like you do in a visitor center, whatever, distillery, whatever. The workplace needs to be inspired, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Workplace needs to be inspired by other industries that are far ahead. So going back to one of our favorite topics of conversation, Angela, food.
What we discussed in that lunch is that food can play such a massive role in the cohesion of a city centre, in creating a community. I remember when I lived in Milan, I was a young, single, 20, 30-year-old. Okay, then I would go to work, but then after work, I would stop with my friends for the aperitivo. I wouldn't go home to have dinner and then go out. And then it was affordable. It was, even with a not too big of a salary, I could still afford that, right? While here, I can't go to the restaurant anymore because I end up spending £70 for a very disappointing meal that if I cook it myself, because my tent bed is so much nicer. So how do we support this industry that is crucial for bringing in people living in the city centre, using the city centre, not just go back home, leave the office, go back home, And the other thing is, you leave the office at 5, the shops are closed. Well, I used to leave the office in Milan at 5 and go shopping and then go for a drink and a dinner with my friends. So how do we support these industries in being more affordable, more accessible? Policy driven. If you look at the UK, for some reason that I cannot fathom, has not really supported hospitality. You'll see lots of healthy focus for it to be in London, and it's thriving because the size of the city and there's about critical mass. But I've never got it. You were talking like Buddhists are going, and in the case, we were sharing that view. I mean, I think that it needs to see as be seen as a kind of self-sustaining cycle. Like, whatever it takes, take all the rates for hospitality, like when it's food-based, and just cut them in goals. Stop the utility companies from knifing everybody by capping, like they do in France. We pay full rate for EDF to provide us with power so that the French can get it capped. We need a different political spectrum sitting underneath that, but actual policy to support hospitality is needed right now. If you look at how much is on its knees in Glasgow alone, the restaurants you used to go to are not open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday now, or you can't go and get a good lunch scene because they can't afford the power, they can't afford to stay open, at the cost of living. And then there's so many jobs, and it's a very job-intensive industry. So the more that you help them survive, the more jobs there are, the more people are earning, the more people can afford to live, and it's a cycle. And I do think it should be down and on at the beginning of the year, and what you were saying is absolutely right. People were out of work and then they're just eating. in the little cafes, because it was all full of Italians at that venue, not international people. They're all eating on the spot because they could get double kitted food. So instead of Sainsbury and Tesco making all the record profits, the money was going into the locally owned hospitality, but hospitality is struggling so much just to survive. It needs intervention. It can't be a real estate thing looking over there and wishing it would be better. We need to act. It's on those huge list of things that the government and are struggling with. How do we go to our schools? How do we? It's all coming back to the same root and tax bases are all. But I would definitely, if I were in government in Scotland, I'd be changing policy to support hospitality this week, and just to heal. Then you still watch them sit with you all the time. Hospital is the best place to be a therapist.
See the utility prices, just going back on that, you realise that a quarter of your electricity price is tax, right? And we pay the highest energy costs in the Western Murray. And a lot of it is down to specifically the policies and not actually stupid policies. Because if they switch that tax to gas, there's a marginal increase in gas price, but a massive reduction in the electricity cost. And I have no idea why they don't change it. I've written 2 blogs for SPF on this. It just is absolute insanity. You couldn't believe you would get all that money back by that marginal increase in gas, and you would massively just loan a quarter, 25% off your electricity costs. We've seen people called gurus or whatever they would in government. I think that if you look at the societies that are working best, it's the societies where the people got more power. It's where they're hacking. And those are where there is more unity. They're not stuck in silos working on color and not leading. The more that happens, the more vibrant it is, the societies work better, or where there is more deliberative democracy for the man in the street. And that ties in very closely to food industry, just in terms of how you live day to day. So I would have a food guru on the sports batch government, or can I be the food guru? But see, the thing is you talk about, see intelligence, scientific facts, that intelligence amongst a group increases if you're debating. And you can actually have intelligent conversations and you're sitting eating your own. You're talking about, you might be talking about politics, you might be talking about big ideas. It's a space that's safe to actually be creative and thinking. So it's probably really underplayed, that kind of just bringing your defences down, having a half glass of light, right? But bringing the defences down, it'll feed that creative freedom of expression and ideas.
And that's 90% of my business. 90% of my business is having lunch or a coffee with somebody, sitting in front of each other. It's not a Teams meeting. Teams meetings, you do 10 minutes, you discuss what you need to discuss, and then over. When we go for lunch, we meet for a coffee. Then that way, you don't know where the conversation is going to lead you. That's how the ideas come together. And then that's how I run the business here. Is so important. We have to just that time, but just sit, relax, and not enjoy each other's company.
Yeah.
What do you think? Best cool lady in my company, Angela.
You know what? The freedom of got a couple of views there. So actually, and this may sound disingenuous, is that actually, if you look at the consumer spend in Glasgow city centre, the spend on food and beverage and leisure is actually doing really well. And actually, if you look at the relative performance over a number of years, retail's down and the leisure sector is up. And so that shows that Glasgow has got a phenomenal potential to really sort of optimise the city centre. I keep coming back to Union Street, and I actually was walking down Argyle Street, looked up Union Street today, and there was no buses. It was just people walking up and down it. And the first time I took the yonks, I thought, so I might actually walk up Union Street. It actually looks, there, but without a load of buses running down it. And it made me think back to the days of, again, I don't want to sound like a little fart here, but sort of late 80s, early 90s, the retailers and the food and the pubs that used to come in a prototype, their offer on Queen Street and on Union Street. And they used to come in there because it was cheap, because there was good footfall, because there were students, there were commuters, and there was this kind of really varied demographic, and they would try out their offer on jeans or clothes or food or kebabs or whatever it was, and they would try it out there because it was cheap before they moved to Dargal Street or Solihull Street or Buchanan Street. And so I think what's happened is that because Buchanan Street has now become this kind of black hole that has sucked in all this kind of urban vitality, the surrounding streets have suffered massively. And there's issues there about oversupply, et cetera, but I think you can see places like Miller Street, for example, and, what Scoop are trying to do there. We can see now, I think, in locations in the city where cost of occupancy is falling, that people are starting to prototype again. And dare I say it, I think there's a big thing that Glasgow really gets around using social value, which I think is kind of what you're talking about on food. Really, we're talking about social value and the glue, and how can we use social value to then build investment and property value to get some of this kind of mixed use space going. And it has to be said, the single greatest opportunity for all of that in the city centre is the depot that was sitting on Argyle Street. So you've got 250,000 square feet of vacant department stores sitting above this retail, 30,000 square feet floor plates. And that should be, in my view, the kind of beating heart of mixed use in Scotland, in Glasgow. It's sitting there. It's desperately unloved. It could be social value, investment value, retail, leisure, F&B. There's organisations like Mission Kitchen in London looking around the UK, going like, we're looking to land next. And so that bit about, and I think Glasgow's really good at it, is building that social value plus parks and culture and music, and then translating that into footfall. But once you do that, all the other stuff will come behind it. So, if you want to speak to the retail leisure agents in town, there are 15 to 20 potential occupiers out there looking for the next place to be. We can see what Ivy are about to do on some bits of place, which is going to be extraordinary. And okay, that's a higher end, and you might say that's for a small demographic in Glasgow, but it shows you that the money is there. I think if you get your offer right, but Glasgow needs to get back on this kind of entrepreneurial prototyping of businesses. And I have to say I'm a bit jealous of Clyde Gateway, because I keep on looking at that going, fuck, why is it happening there? I want it to happen in the city centre. Where is that between flipping Debenhams and Strasbourg?
It's like cities that have mayors where you have that long-term legacy thinking, as well as I don't like council bashing because they're lovely and it's hard work and they're understaffed and they're doing their best. But when you have that that legacy thinking, say from a mayor type or our Regeneration company, it's a different perspective that they can bring, and they can think about the full picture. And the other piece I think that's sometimes missing at this, I would love for this to be a thing, is that the cost of not doing these things right to the state. So what does it cost in terms of social care? What does it cost in terms of healthcare? And what does it cost in terms of the infrastructure that you have to create around kind of the living that is based on kind of, essentially loneliness and car travel and not being sociable with each other. And, what is that cost? Because that must be significant. We did a project in Verkeething, and SBank did a post-occupancy review, and anecdotally, one of the people said that she was off her meds because she liked living where she was living now. And, if you think about that in terms of the impact that can have, I think that's almost the missing piece in terms of quantifying that sort of cost equation and that funding. I don't think it's there. I've looked to have also across any of that type of thinking, but the cost of not doing it well is significant. And so there should be some way of measuring that. And honestly, not just if you're using a post-part tool, but the countage team, because what you're describing was the talent, not the experience of the business. And so that is essentially should be absolute signing, shouldn't it? The shout outs to the event to help us. There's a lot of business failure there. There's a lot of trouble through my knee because I need to keep avoiding there. and concrete to work on them so they wouldn't understand how much of a struggle it is. And I went down there one night, I think it was the Sunday night or Tuesday night or something, and it was dead. Dead. I should be something wrong, something functionally wrong. If the thriving area is just this big team in the middle of the city,
Yes, no,
can't they? Right?
Yeah. That's pretty stagnated places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those like private landowners then, so Landsec basically control a third of the shop fronts in the area when Buchanan Street, and I would until Buchanan Galleries into the mix of where that real mixed development so can be in terms of the opportunity for a living room for the city. And should would be the glue to that. So yeah, why on earth does Glasgow not have a large scale European style food hall showcasing all of the amazing small businesses and cuisines and mix of different ethnicity and basically fought in the city? And that's why in the incubation sector. So we've been lucky enough to do quite a lot of research on it and European style food hall models with an organisation called Webuild that you're immediately involved in. And it's not just men hard directors spawning about Europe and going to visit time out markets and all of this kind of.
That is, Gina. That is, it really is.
I mean, I was pretty lucky recently with the Buchanan Galleries to go on a trip to Oslo and to visit Matt Hallen in Woodhall and the Vulcan development. So this was a completely new neighbourhood in the city that nobody lived in. It was an ex-industrial site. They had no footfall, but they've gone from multi-day to 1.3 million visitors per year. And we got to meet the developer and really speak games about how the neighbourhood was created. So there's Resi, there's hotel, and there's like an arena and you want events and things and retail and coffee shops and everything. But right in the heart is the repurposing of an old industrial building into this food hall. And coming back to the kind of Feminist City thing, it is that free space in the city. So their visitors are 60% women, and it's that space where you can bring your kids. You don't have any obligation to buy anything, but it's in a vibrant and like a place that is connected to the local food culture in the city and things, and you can come and do a bit of work and get the bath. So I think it's really about the operation of these spaces as well. Like it's making sure there's events on. There's a cookery skill there, speciality food retail as well as the kind of restaurant stuff. And that's a mini version of that we try to kind of create and kind of capitalise into in Inverness was the repurposing of the 150-year-old Victorian market in the centre of the city. And that was minimal investment now, £1.5 million of common goods, price of council stewardship, council run facility. And the footfall has gone up tenfold, and it's about the food, but it's not just about the food. It's about the fact that there's pride events there, we've booked classes for babies, there's music events, dancing. I saw a video the other day of people up on the tables dancing with like live dishes and things like that. Is what it's all about. That's the spirit that Glasgow can bring to something like that, and I think that's the opportunity in the Buchanan Galleries. It's coming back to what you were saying about diverse uses that are stacked in the city. We've got a great round floor, but there's all this underused upper floors. So a lot of Golden Z study we did was about what can we do and what can we stack and build into those upper floors. And that I think they look the opportunity to get up and Buchanan Galleries, which is real exciting.
So we do it in that, right? We got events, we got music, we got cooking classes, we got that's it. It's more scale, it's a lot. Just to wrap this thing up, we know what Angela wants to happen in the next 10 years for things to kick off. She made it very clear. So for the remaining 4 speakers, starting with Peter, the one thing you would like to see different in the next 10 years that you think it would really kick off our regeneration of the city centre?
Try to imagine what it's going to look like. I think for me, it's actually, I would actually go with the equation of I would rather have a mayor in the city that is ambitious, leads the way. That's what's happened in Manchester, right? And rather than the civil servant, that'll be political, right? And we need somebody we need an entrepreneurial person at the helm of this city, right? To realise what it can be, not put the blockers up all the time, because that's all we face when we're trying to develop in this city. So and tidy it up because it's an absolute shambles at the moment. Right, the bins, the state of the streets. I'm worried about what the square's going to look like when it's done. Is it going to be some twinks, railways, proper urban greening? You know, and there's such a waste of funds on poor projects that aren't delivering for the city, and that needs to change.
Interesting point, actually, because when that happened, the city was by run down, like sadly there. And then, you know, all my friends are staying there, so I go went by like the change of main plays such a massive role. Because when they started going, when we ran next the city, the pond, and it's all beautiful and clean and with art and architecture. So actually, that's so true that we need somebody on the top that they
With a vision and ambition and authority to deliver it. I think that's the biggest thing. I'm sure the people of Glasgow would much prefer that than somebody just spouting generic stuff about the property sector that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Right? So you've not asked me that question, so that'll be fine.
You're fantastic that opening up that conversation can people and feeling you can business and policy at the time education.
Cool. They did, yeah. 100%.
Money, I think about mindset, kill, tangle,
Yeah.
and then I have like particularly bad experience of what is they put you were just to strengthening, bringing in a big masterpiece and the trigger you get the council relax, the families do it.
Yes.
Scared to leave some of the best stuff when you get an issue, with somebody doing baby.
And do you know what it is? I'm being honest again. There's a lot of incompetence, right? A lot of incompetence you face in these things, especially when you're talking about the land side of things. Just not being able to get stuff over the line.
I was just an old friend with private sector guys with their bad thing, and not. You have to bear it a bit. Minerals say, I see another one of you cheats. It can be a reason conflict with your person. So like, they're quiet, but to do with the venison then.
Yeah.
It can hand into the chemistry, but it can enhance what the council want to do if they've got a clear vision and they've got these clear outcomes and priorities that they want to do, and they can, see fund or like fund the infrastructure and all that. The private sector can just snowball that into something that's sort of impactful in what the council might be able to do at once, because they are underfunded and they know they have a lack of skill.
But there's a fear of decisions and taking a decision.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. You need someone at the helm who's brave to move it forward. I still feel that there's such procrastination and nobody looks at it. Nobody wants to make a mistake.
You need a strong bit.
Exactly. But that's what I'm saying. You need that in the air. Yeah.
At least
Yeah.
What's that one thing you want?
So you've gone for the top. I would go for the ground up. So embedding communities in what's the future on their places, because we do a lot of community engagement, and every time it reminds me that you don't know what you don't know about a place until you talk to people and they say, oh, what you've shown there is rubbish because actually everybody does this, or so it's that really good local knowledge of how places work and what they need, and trying to embed that in a way that's productive, that doesn't create polarization, that is inclusive of everybody and not just the people who can have time to turn up to a church hall at 7:00 AM. I think some more work on that side of things would be very beneficial as well. I'm semi clear of that one, and then I would add that idea about I joined that vision. I feel like every town or any city in Scotland, and Scotland as a soul, as a nation, needs to have a clear vision of what we can achieve. We can achieve incredible things over the country, and that's it, our cities and towns, but everything I feel should be joined up in a national vision that every town and city can see their place within that future. And we're looking, big things like new city development plan, all that stuff can be great, but it needs to be visual. People need to be able to see what the potential is, and that's the work that we want to do. So that's what to.
And books. God, daughter can't wait. can't have just one thing. So I think the major thing will be, can we? I think what we're going through is a glitch. I have to say, I know people are wringing their hands and the city looks shite and it's dirty and blah blah blah. But this is a tiny little spasm in the history of Glasgow. Only 7 years. Yeah, but I mean, in the sense, in the longevity of the city, 850 years, 850 years ago, who knows? It's a tiny little microcosm, and I get it that things look difficult. It's systemic, and I do think that cities are always on the move. They're chaotic. They're uncontrollable. I just hope that we can, figure out how to repair the fix of the system relatively quickly. I think we need to be taking 100 years view of the city at least. I think we need to be working together to decide, the value, kind of reimagining the value proposition of Glasgow and making sure when people come here to build stuff that they're actually good enough to be here. They're not extractive. They're going to give back to the city. They're going to think long term with us. They're going to think with me stuff like KNT, etc., etc. And I think it's going to be okay. But I get it. But I think it's a moment in time. We just, it's a pain in the arse. We're living through it, but it's going to move on. And this kind of, I think this will be a sort of this is a muscle spasm, which is temporary in the longevity of the city, and we need to be thinking longer term.